Mark Cerny, the lead architect of the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 Pro, has decided to come on camera this past week to present us a deep dive into the hardware specifications of the PlayStation 5 Pro. He decided to do this to clear up some miscommunication that was initially leaked prior to the system's unveiling. And he wanted to also discuss some of the reasons as to why he chose such specifications with the aid of AMD. And he just went into some of the fine details of the hardware specifications that no one was 100% sure of. Now, he mentions that the upgraded chipset for the PlayStation 5 Pro is a cross between RDNA 2 and RDNA 3, but not fully RDNA 3, because that would make it a next generation hardware. That make it a next generation console. So he'll borrow some elements from RDNA 3, namely the ray tracing elements, and apply it to this upgraded chip for PS5 Pro, and redub the chip as RDNA 2.x, as an X-ray. He just mentioned that for the developers. So no main customer is going to care about the name of this chipset. No one's going to care. Only hardware enthusiasts and software developers will actually take that information to heart and say, okay, all right, so this isn't really a next generation hardware. This is just a refinement of PS5, of the PlayStation 5. Okay, fair enough. We will save the big boy stuff for next generation for years down the road. When you do happen to finally give us a development kit for the PS6, the PlayStation 6, then we'll use our newly refined engine for the next generation of hardware and PC. So we'll stand by and wait for the new kits. In the meantime, we'll use this refined PlayStation 5 and show some gradual enhancements to these games, to our future games of this generation, and also improve some of our previously released games. So that's fine. That makes this machine a mid-generation console. Now, some of these finer details that Mr. Cerny was talking about, a lot of it is very technical and will probably go over the majority of the people's heads that's watching this video, including me. A lot of what he was saying was just above my head too. I had to rewatch a couple of segments over and over repeatedly just to get a better understanding, just to get a better grasp of what he's talking about, and try to use my own references as to rationalize what he's saying. And I think I have a better understanding of how their version of ray tracing works now on the PlayStation. And that's definitely one of the key points that he spoke about in this deep dive, was how ray tracing works on the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 Pro. And it's a very technical. I mean, he could be teaching this in seminars, but he does try to simplify it as best he can while staying very technical. I believe that this video was really presented for developers and not the general public, which is perfectly fine. The fact that this was released on YouTube, well, everyone's going to want to watch it, right? Everyone that cares about hardware specifications and their products, yeah, they're going to watch this deep dive. May not understand more than half of it, but they're going to watch it just for the simple fact that it's new information. I'm going to listen to what this architect is saying. I'm a fan of the product. There's another one. And I just want to see if I can understand what the heck he's talking about. And like I said, a lot of people won't understand, but I think he did a good job explaining what the machine is capable of. And he also went in the fact he did want to stress that this machine is not considered a next generation console. A lot of people want to have that misconception that this is actually a next generation console with the PlayStation 5 logo slapped on it. No, this is a refinement. This is a mid-generation console with enhancements. Just like last generation, just like the PS4 Pro, this is also an enhanced machine too. But for the sake of the PS5 Pro, this machine has some of the latest feature sets of what RDNA 2 and RDNA 3 can do. Now, I found it interesting. Mark Cerny wanted to clarify that this is an RDNA 2 based machine, just like the base PS5 is as well. This is an enhanced RDNA 2 machine. This is not RDNA 3 or RDNA 4. So I want to talk about ray tracing. He mentioned that it's been refined on this machine so it'd be more efficient and faster. What I'm going to do is talk about how it actually works. I'm going to provide a very dumbed down, simplified version of how ray tracing works for this machine. So here we go. I need you to picture every game in existence uses what is called a game engine, right? It's very similar to a car engine, I suppose, or a vehicle. So in the aspect of ray tracing, which is the lighting engine portion of a game engine, the PS5 Pro allows for, let's just say, one ray of light. Picture this. One ray of light from a light source. That can be the sun. That could be a flashlight. It could be anything. One ray of light from a light source flies out. It's instructed to fly out and hit any object that it can. And that object is a polygon in the sense of this. The polygon for the PS5 Pro is actually wrapped with inside an encased box. Okay, that box is the target. That is the intended target of the ray. So as soon as the light hits that target, which is kind of hits it and goes through it, it's meant to actually go through it. When it hits that box, the engine says, yay, I've actually hit something, okay? But I want to go further down, deeper than just this surface. I want to know what that object underneath is. I want to find a polygon, okay? So the light is instructed to dig deeper through the box to find a triangle or a polygon. Now, once it finds that polygon, it says, yay, I found an actual polygon triangle. Now, what do I want to do with this? Now that I know where it is, what do I want the light to do? Now, typically, what it's supposed to do is once it sees that triangle, it will actually instruct the polygon or the light source to, once you hit that triangle, I need you to bounce off it. Okay, I need you to bounce off it to any other direction that you want to, or I need you to curve around it. I need you to bend around it. Either bounce off it or bend around it. That is, and wherever that light goes, that is a trace. Okay, that's the first trace. Now, for these game engines, there's only so much memory that and so much processing this machine can actually do. So typically, at the very least, minimum, it's going to have to do 2 bounces, and then it can dissolve. It can go away. So the light hits the box. It penetrates the box and hits a triangle, which is your polygon. Once it hits the triangle, the game logic tells the engine, okay, light, I need you to bounce in this direction. And once you hit one more object, then stop. Stop moving, because that's as far as we're going to go. All right. And you do that with millions upon millions of polygons. So it looks more realistic. In the past, what developers would do is they would just draw a light source They would have a light source, and that light would bounce, it would hit an object, but it wouldn't go anywhere beyond that. The polygon would absorb the light. So for it to make it look realistic in a realistic environment, you would have multiple light maps all over the place. A light map is basically a texture, okay? That texture is dynamic, it would move. So it looks like a real light, and it would react like a real light, but with no hiccups, no penalties, okay? No measurement of where the light really is. You're faking it, okay? I'll have a light here, I'll have a light there, and they both kind of interact at the same time, so it looks real. Like a pair of headlights. When it hits an object, that object takes on the light, and that's it. It's absorbed like a sponge. But ray tracing, the light is supposed to bounce like real light in the real world, okay? When you shine a flashlight in a dark room, specifically if you shine a flashlight going up in a dark room, parts of the ceiling will light up, yes, and parts of the tops of surfaces are going to light up. It won't be a bright light, but they will appear. You can make a room bright from just a flashlight by pointing the light straight up to the ceiling. It's because it's going to hit and the light is going to bounce and diffuse. Okay. In video games, it won't do that because that's too much memory. That's what ray tracing is all about. You want to trace that path of light to hit everything it can before it diffuses, like real life. And it's dynamic. It doesn't stay still. It can move. And with that movement comes all kinds of memory usage, processing power, math, and a lot of RAM. A lot of memory is involved with ray tracing. That's why no one really uses it too much. If it's done effectively, it can look incredibly realistic. Incredibly realistic. It's easier, in my opinion, and I have no true evidence of this base, but in my theory, ray tracing is much easier to be done from a spotlight than it is through, say, environmental lighting. I think they call that global illumination. Yes, they call it global illumination when they're doing ray traced environments in a closed environment like a hallway, a building. It's easier to do ray tracing, in my opinion. I believe it is. At the very most, at least easier to do ray trace lighting. Reflections, that's another thing. But ray trace lighting is easier to do in a smaller environment. If you try to do that in an open world, forget it. It's not feasible to be doing it in an open world environment. It's too many objects to be bouncing light off of. So you want to just do it in a closed environment to make it look really effective. Like a hallway, a building, a room, anything that's a small environment so the light doesn't have to travel too far. It's much more effective. Now, as a reminder, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series of consoles, they can already do a form of intermediate ray tracing. It can be done, it's just not very effective and it's very expensive. So that's why they try to limit it to just shadows or certain rays of light in a closed environment. Mark Cerny wanted to express that it's much more easier to perform ray tracing, it's much more effective, and it's a lot faster than the base PS5. That's one of the reasons for this mid-generation upgrade. They're really trying to push the frontier of ray tracing for consoles. We'll see how it works. We'll see later down the road how well ray tracing truly works, and whether or not it's very effective for the PlayStation 5 Pro and going forward into newer hardware, next generation family of hardware. We now come to the PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution PSSR, or the PSSR, segment of his video, and he went a little bit of a deeper dive into that. This machine is using a form of machine learning or AI technology, whatever have you. He mentioned it's all the same. That it's an upscaler. It is on the hardware baked into the silicon upscaler for the PlayStation. Now, I thought the original PlayStation could already do machine learning, but they just wasn't using it too much. Well, now they're definitely using it. He says that this technology has been in the works since the original PlayStation 5, and that they needed the additional time and research to make it effective within the silicon, so they waited until just now, 2024, to apply it to hardware. Back then, it was a working concept and it wasn't ready. It was just a brainstorm for the original PlayStation 5. I could have sworn they had machine learning, or maybe that's just the Xbox. I know the Xbox definitely has it, but they haven't used it too much either. Anyway, back to this. The PSSR, how it works, basically what it is it fills gaps in the graphics. And let me see if I can explain this in a very easy to explain term. So picture yourself on a road, like a highway or a cross-country road. When you're walking or driving on this road, you start to notice that there are holes in the ground. There are holes in the road. So these are potholes, and they suck. And it just makes for a very bumpy, non-smooth ride. The concept of how the PSSR works is, PSSR is essentially the city works. Okay, how it works, or how it's supposed to function, it will take a bumpy road and smooth it out. How do you smooth it out? Well, in the concept, in relation to the PlayStation 5 Pro's hardware, PSSR is actually using parts of the processor and definitely the RAM, because the engine is feeding the RAM information for the PSSR to fill the gaps. So the road is been made in 1080p resolution. Okay, it is 1080p resolution. The PSSR's job is to smooth the road so that it's as smooth as it can get at 4K resolution. It takes that 1080p road and glaze it with more layers of asphalt to get it to a nice, smooth, bright and shiny, pretty as a picture, 4K resolution. On this road, as I mentioned before, there are potholes. The PSSR's job is to fill the potholes filled with pixels. Okay, depending on how deep those potholes are, which is your resolution, will determine the workload that the PSSR will need to do to fill the gaps so that it's one cohesive image. Now, how did those potholes get there? That is from checkerboard rendering, I'm afraid. Now, native resolution is one solid road. Checkerboard resolution is the road with potholes. It is 1080p or 900p, God forbid. God forbid it is trying to upscale from 900p or 720p. If it's a 1080p image to get to 4K, it will fill the gaps with its own made up graphics. It's close. In fact, I think what it does, I think it takes the existing pixels from before and it just copies it. It's simply what it does. It takes the images from before and it copies it, or it gives its best guess as to what this image should look like, and I'm going to fill the hole. I'm going to fill the gap, and I'm going to do that as fast as possible per frame. The pitfall of this is, if it is trying to do that, if it's trying to boost an image from a very low native resolution, then you can get ghosting. You can get glitches. So you don't want to render from 1080p or lower. You want to render from the highest you can get it to 4K. So ideally, you want to do this technology with an image that's 1440p. 1440p, or even easier, is 800p, 1800p if you can do it. 1800p, 1440p, or 1800p to hit 4K, much easier. So much easier. But if you're going to ask an engine to upscale from 720p to 4K. You are asking a lot, and you're going to need to fill that RAM with a lot of information for the pisser to have enough time to do it all in one pass, in one frame. So as a reminder, the PSSR is just there to fill the gaps, so you can have a much crisper image when you're actually driving down this road. It's a much smoother ride when you're driving down the road if you're using the PSSR to lay the foundation so you can drive over it. Otherwise, you're gonna have a bumpy ride. It's gonna look unclear on screen. It would just be a blurrier image. It's not gonna be very sharp. You want 4K resolution, not just for the output of the screen. You want 4K resolution on your textures. You want the textures to look good, not blurry. I mean, what good is it to have the screen render at this high resolution just to show some blurry textures? So you need to render the whole image, including the textures. Textures need to be high resolution too. Not just the screen, the textures too. So with all that done combined, you should have, in theory, a very crisp image done with very low memory usage. But the PSSR has been configured, has been engineered so it can do it incredibly fast and then dump that memory out of the RAM and fill it with more information. Well, the engine will do that. The engine will keep filling the memory, and it has scrubbers. The PlayStation 5 has what is called scrubbers to remove that stuff from the bandwidth and the RAM, so that the engine can keep filling the RAM with more information, and the PSSR pushes it and clears out all the bad data. It does that incredibly fast, milliseconds. That's how it's worked. That's how it's supposed to work. Does that make sense? Can everybody picture that? Like I said, if what I'm saying is incorrect, please let me know. But I believe this is how it works. This is the general consistency of how the PSSR works when done correctly in practice. Now, developers are already using it, and some of them are using it very correctly, and it's given us amazing results on certain titles. It's not across the board, unfortunately. It's still this technology is still within its infancy stage. And they're hoping to have this perfected by the time the PlayStation 6 arrives. They're really hoping to have this perfected. Right now, they're in their growing pains. So every game is a case-by-case basis. Some games, it's beautiful applying it on. In other games, it's a problem. Like, I believe one game that had a problem with this was Alan Wake 2. It made the images a lot blurrier than the base console. It also slowed down the frame rate. So frame rate has suffered. It had some growing pains, but I think they're fixing it. I think they applied some fixes to make it work better now. But the frame rate is still at 40 frames a second though. So you need to fix that. If you want to play this game with ray tracing, you're going to be playing it through the PSSR, on the PlayStation 5 Pro at 40 frames currently right now. Unless you turn off the PSSR, then I believe the frame rate can go up. It can go up to 60. It just won't be as clear. So it's a little bit of trade-off there. But like I said, this is it is in its infancy stage. We're going to see how well it does on a case-by-case basis, on a game-by-game. It's not across the board. Once you turn it on, it has its ups and it's definitely got its downs. But there's more pros than cons from what Sony's saying. And from what certain developers are saying, it's definitely got more pros than cons. Hopefully. One of the games that worked fine with it was Stellar Blade 2. Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade, that's Unreal Engine 4, and the game is beautiful, from what I'm told. I haven't laid eyes on it, but people are saying it is beautiful through the PSSR. So that's one success story with it. Now, as a reminder, Mark Cerny definitely reminded us this is not a next generation piece of hardware. This is a mid-generation console for the PlayStation 5, and that I'm going to address some of the leaks that came out from over the summer about its performance. Namely, the rumor that this machine was able to perform 33 teraflops of processing power. He came out and said, completely wrong, this is what its true performance is. It is going to be from the base console of 10 teraflops to 16 teraflops, to 16.7 teraflops of processing power. No more, no less. This is much more realistic of a leap, of a hardware leap, than 33 teraflops. That is definitely more of a next generational leap. And I commend them for that. You sure took a long time to do this deep dive. The machine, I believe, was announced back in September. It released at the end of October. No, I'm sorry. It released in early November, November the 7th, I believe. Yeah, comes out November the 7th. And you're going to do a deep dive after the machine have released. You're going to do a deep dive on the specifications after the hardware is released. That seems counterproductive. At this point, the devs already got the hardware in front of them, so they can tell. They'll be able to tell if you're lying or not now. So yeah, you should have done this deep dive maybe the very next week after it was officially announced in the fall. This is late. Do what you want, Mark Cerny. It's your hardware, it's your baby, it's your show. You want to present this all late? For who? I mean, this deep dive wasn't for us, the customers. It really wasn't. I feel that you made this deep dive all late. What if this was filmed back in the fall and y'all guys just released it now? Is that possible? Maybe this was filmed in October because it was announced in September. Maybe this was filmed in October, and for some reason y'all guys just sat on it until after the machine release. Y'all just sat on this video until after the machine release, as if you were hiding something. Is it possible? Were you just hiding something? Were you just gonna wait until Digital Foundry did a deep dive of themselves? Because they went into it. They like it. They like what the machine represents. They essentially said, if you want a better PlayStation 5 and you have the money, then treat yourself. But if you're okay with the base PS5, then there's no need. If you're fine with what you're getting right now, then and you're not really caring too much about resolution or ray tracing, and you're currently okay with the kind of performance that you're getting from the PlayStation, then there's no need for you to upgrade. But if you are a hardware enthusiast that you absolutely need the latest and greatest, no matter how soon it came out or how late it comes out, you just want to be in with the crowd, then okay. Spend the money. Just go ahead and spend your hard-earned $700 for the base digital PS5 Pro, and if you care about physical, you're going to have to buy the disc drive separately for another $80. It takes the developers to actually apply these new features onto their games, and I do believe that Sony does require that every future game has to have a PS5 Pro enhancement. It has to have a PS5 Pro version for the game to be sold on our machine, and that also includes anything from Microsoft too. I would think any game that means that Doom, The Dark Ages, Indiana Jones, all of the past releases that they've done so far must have a enhanced version for the Pro for the pass certification. Now, once again, I'm just going to say it's not for me. I don't need the PS5 Pro. I have access to a base PS5. I don't need to buy a Pro. Regardless of its enhancements. It has some noticeable enhancements for certain games, but I don't really need it. I would much rather just wait for the next generation, because also keep this in mind, and this is very true, okay? And I hate to say this, but developers, for the most part, all developers have a deadline. They don't have the time to be enhancing every little game that they got. They're not going to have that kind of time. They have deadlines to meet. They have all these SKUs. They have base PS5, and now you got the PS5 Pro. We got to do double the work, and it's not like we got more time. We got to do the double the work in the same amount of time. So yeah, we're just gonna wing it. We're gonna do the bare minimum and push it out the door. And if we have time to patch it after its release, and I'm speaking just really on behalf of AAA games. AAA games are gonna have this problem. They're gonna do the bare minimum just to get it out the door. But just to get it out the door, yeah, we'll be all right. We'll be all right just doing the bare minimum. And that's as far as they're going to go. That's probably one of the reasons why Microsoft chose not to do it this time, not to do a mid-generation before, because that's what happened with the Xbox One X. So we're going to bow out. Sony, you can go ahead and do your mid-generation. And while you're doing that, since you have a contract with us, well, we have a contract with you, to allow you to have Call of Duty on your machine, you have to give us your dev kits. So we're going to know your specs. We're also going to know your specs of the PlayStation 6. So if they really want to stick it to Sony, they could. We know your specs, and you don't have to know ours. So, hey, I find that hilarious. But I don't want to go too much further into this. But that's essentially what the PlayStation 5 Pro is about. And with that being said, I'd like to thank everyone that has supported me so far. I adore all of you. Thank you so much for coming and listening to me rant about hardware and about industry talk. I'm having a ball, and I really want to take this moment to thank you all. And with that being said, I'm your host, Musical Weapon. Come back again. We'll do this again.